Good evening, and welcome back to Not Yinz Father's podcast. I am Sean, as always, joined by Jacob and Corey. Excited to be here, and we're going to call this episode Steelers Hot Takes, something we've been working on for a little bit. A lot of Steeler news coming out recently, a lot of things we're going to get into, and then some things maybe that have rolled over from years prior. A lot of interesting topics today. I don't want to spoil it all. So with that, Jake, where do we want to get started?
Let's talk Super Bowl since we just got to enjoy the latest one. We got to watch the Eagles dismantle the Chiefs and what many thought would be a closer game. Both teams look very different from what the Steelers present and what they've given fans in recent years. They're both exciting teams, and it might have not been an exciting game, but I don't think the Steelers are close to being able to compete with these teams yet. And an offseason could change that. You know, the Commanders with a quarterback look like an entirely different team this year, along with a few others that made big jumps. And I think the Steelers are more than capable of doing that with another offseason victory. But, you know, I'd really like to talk about what differentiates the Steelers roster from this Eagles roster.
Yeah, definitely a heavy topic. So what separates the 2024-2025 NFL champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, from next year's Pittsburgh Steelers? The Steelers more than likely taking the Lions longevity approach, multiple good draft classes. We've stacked a few. We do that again this year. Maybe we're building around Justin Fields and we could get there. But Corey has the keys, some great analysis on financially what separates the Steelers from the Eagles. So let's start there.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just go ahead and share my screen with you guys so we can all check out these stats. We can scroll all along here, all the way back until the Steelers last made the Super Bowl in 2010. So starting out in 2011 with the Giants winning, we've got the cap sheets as well as their average active roster cap sheet, their positional breakdowns, deep green here, quarterback. The Giants spent the most amount of their money. As well as defensive end. We can see basically from 2011 to 2024 how have Super Bowl winning teams spent their money, and we can average those, look at average position counts, average age of those positions, percent of the cap, active roster cap spread amongst those positions, as well as just this 212%. The cap since 2012 has risen 112%. We've adjusted the salary, so like here in 2020, Tom Brady was making $25 million. Adjusted to the 2024 salary cap, that's going to be $32 million that Tom Brady would have been paid. So everything is on a level playing field over the years. And here we see the 2011 to 2024 Super Bowl champion average cap sheet. Being that the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, we can look at their cap sheet here, as well as the Chiefs from last year. And before we even get started, one thing I want to touch on is the Eagles spent just $168 million, which was 14th among NFL franchises, on their active roster. To win the Super Bowl last year, the Chiefs spent $194 million on their active roster, which, given the $30 million cap increase from last season to this season, equates to $221 million that the Chiefs spent last year to win the Super Bowl. So not only did the Eagles beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but they did so for, when brought into 2024 dollars, $50 million more on their active roster. So just an incredibly efficient Super Bowl win from the Eagles. And let's get into how they spent their money this year. You can see that they're spending $23 million on their wide receiver position. That was the highest paid position that they had, followed by corner. So secondary and skilled position receivers. A.J. Brown was in there making $11 million. We've got max and minimum contracts as well as average salary per position and position count. Just at first glance, when you compare this to the average Super Bowl champion from 2011 to 2024, outside of the QB position, we see that that's kind of right in line. I mean, spending exactly that average $23 million on their wide receiver position and a little bit more on their secondary. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on just what you're seeing here in the numbers.
So first thing that strikes me is, and Corey, I know you have the number. Steelers spent historically low number money at the wide receiver position last year. I know that.
A balmy $5 million, $5.6 million, 2.2% of their active cap on the receiver position. So $18 million shy of where the Eagles and the average Super Bowl champion have been. Before we even get into it, offensively as a whole, I mean, the average Super Bowl champion, I think, is spending 43% of their active cap on the offensive side of the ball, compared with 36% on the defensive side of the ball. The Steelers this past year, 18.8% offensively and a whopping 50% defensively. I mean, no surprise. We all knew we had the highest paid defense, but I mean, that would be perhaps the most outstanding and remarkable Super Bowl victory if a team spent that amount of money on a defense, that little amount on their offense, and still managed to come out with it. In the analysis, in the years over, one thing I pointed out to you guys, since the Steelers have last been to the Super Bowl, there's just 3 teams that have won the Super Bowl spending more money on their active roster cap defensively than offensively. Sean, you actually got 2 out of the 3 right. When I asked if you wanted to guess, the Eagles,
Baltimore.
Yep, in 2017, Baltimore with Flacco, and then the Seahawks whenever they had Russ on his rookie deal, and the Legion of Boom. So
That's insane.
that's how the numbers stack up.
Yeah, what stands out to me is, and I've been saying this for years, it would be absolutely wonderful if the Steelers would get with the times. The NFL is an ever-growing offensive game, transition from a power running game into a pro-style offense, play-action pass, into a spread them out, quarterback-driven league. Penalties favor the offense, and the Steelers play reverse Uno card and say, we'll invest more in our defense. It's time. It's time for the Steelers. We have some young, promising players over on that offensive side of the ball. We've invested a lot of high draft picks on the offensive side of the ball, but it's time that we match that money to go out and be aggressive. I'm not saying spend money to spend money, but rather target guys, be willing to pay maybe a little bit outside, maybe a couple million more than what you project their value to be, but be aggressive and really upgrade that offense. How you feel, Jake?
Yeah, I definitely agree. We need to allocate more resources to the offense, and we're paying guys on the defense these second and third contracts that might not be worth it. The Larry Ogunjobi experiment might have went on too far. We brought on Preston Smith last year. I know we just traded a pick for him. To me, we really needed more offensive resources last year, and to go out and get Preston Smith in the midst of our offensive woes was kind of mind-boggling to me. We have to pay more in the receiver position, the tackle position. I know we went out and got 2 tackles in the last 2 drafts, but we may have to go out and spend money on an established guy. And lastly, you look at the Eagles roster and how they were able to spend so little money on a Super Bowl winning team, and it goes back to drafting well. Good teams draft well. They get at least, I'd say, a quarter to not maybe even half the roster on their rookie contracts, which is cap friendly in comparison to those second and third contract guys. You look at the average age of the Eagles roster, that would suggest too that a lot of those guys are on their rookie deals.
Yeah, average age of the Eagles roster just shy of 25 years old.
Wow.
Offensively, 26 and a half. I'm just looking at their cap sheet here. 22-year-old Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Defensively, I mean, that's a guy on his rookie deal that came in and made impact for them this year. Isaiah Rodgers, 26-year-old.
They've just consistently hit on draft picks. I mean, drafting defensively out of the University of Georgia is always a given, but then this year hitting a couple back-to-back corners and then Cooper DeJean, I mean, leads the NFL this year in grading out to finish the year. What a draft. I like the Steelers drafts the last couple years. I hope we can hit it this year. RIP Preston Smith, $13.9 million. The Steelers just released him today. So they're starting to shred some of the money defensively. And what are we looking at now, roughly, guys? Like $60-some million in cap space?
$54 million right now, but we're projecting to probably cut Ogunjobi, I would imagine, and Cole Holcomb. That's the 2 that we were predicting last episode, and that's going to put us somewhere in the 60s.
The most money the Steelers have had recently has me excited. Andy Weidl, Omar Khan, aggressive, to say the least. I mean, we were linked to every available wide receiver for trade last year. Didn't get it done with Brandon Ayuk. Maybe played with that fire a little too long. This year, I expect Omar Khan to be just as aggressive, and he's going to make a splash. I can feel it.
So what are some other things out in the news recently.
I think we got to talk about Ireland. The Steelers making the trip to Ireland. Exciting times for Steeler fans. Maybe it's something that this group would look to do, make the trip out to Ireland. But it comes with a cost, right? It's exciting, but at the same time, that's a lot of travel.
I mean, the Steelers are one of those teams in the AFC North that don't have to travel a lot for their away games. Most of the time when they travel out west, it's a bag of mixed results.
Yep.
I mean, they'd never typically win against the Raiders when they go away, but they've had some success against some other teams out west. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of giving away one of our home games. And if it is to be true in 2026, I hope it's a late season game. I think our younger fans, the new generation of fans, are more likely to come to an early season game in Pittsburgh. And the conditions in Pittsburgh in the, later the season typically gets sold secondhand on StubHub or whatever. People try to get their hands on it for cheap because people just don't go. The weather's too bad for a lot of the younger fans and families. So if it's true and we're going to Ireland, then I hope that we trade one of the later season games.
I agree. Corey, how do you feel about the Ireland game?
I'm excited about the guys going and playing in Dublin. The Rooneys being of Irish descent, I think it probably means a good amount to them as the chairman of the organization. I know those tickets are going to sell out quick. The Germany games, the tickets sold out. I think it'll be exciting, and I think we'll probably will travel well to that game. Every Steelers game basically is a home game, so I think it should be no different in Ireland. But as you guys pointed out, it just stinks to have a home game taken away. The NFL should find a way to just have overseas intercontinental games be away games for both teams. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It'll be cool to watch. Who knows? Maybe we'll find a way to get the Not Yinz crew in Dublin for that game.
All right. Next order of business that we want to talk about. A lot of names being thrown around. Every time I turn on ESPN, it seems like ESPN is talking about the Steelers quarterback situation. We've had everything this year from Russ versus Fields this year. It continues into next year. Report just came out the other day that says Rooney himself likes Russ over Fields for some reason. Then we have the story about the Russ camp leaking this story about Arthur Smith not letting him change plays at the line of scrimmage. And then we get into the Steelers are now going to be linked to every available or potentially available quarterback to ever exist.
And they're somehow to acquire every single quarterback.
So just this week alone, we have Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence, Matthew Stafford. There's always a link to Kirk Cousins. And then there's obviously like sneaky guys that as a second option or a backup option, a guy like Daniel Jones. I like that. Do not give me an older quarterback that failed elsewhere. Well, maybe he'll turn it around with the Steelers. I don't want to take that risk, guys. So what are you guys seeing out there in the news?
I've seen that Justin Fields, his stock price just went up from the way that he behaved getting benched and throughout the remaining of the season. He was 4-2 as a starter. He had a couple bad games. The Colts game, it took him some time to get started. The whole offense looked lethargic. And in the Cowboys game, the defense kind of bailed them out with a few turnovers to keep that game close. But Fields camp, they're saying that they're going to get some good offers from some teams. And I think the Steelers have the cap to match and acquire Fields at a cheaper price than what they would be paying someone like Stafford, someone like Rodgers, or Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, his contract is not ideal given his production. Corey brought that up earlier this week when we were talking about what it would take to acquire him. And we don't even know what the Steelers called about. They called Jacksonville and this guy named Burr, that does sports commentating for Jacksonville, or maybe he has a podcast like we do. He was the one that said that we were seeing what the price was for Trevor Lawrence, and it would probably be a first and a second, which I doubt that's very seriously. Maybe if they give us a first and a second to acquire that huge contract, that sounds more likely.
Well, actually, our guy at Steelers Depot, Alex Kazora, quickly took to Twitter and debuffed that. And they sorted it out. The guy quickly backtracked and said, no, I was just speculating on what it might cost. The Steelers never made that offer. I'm just speculating that it might cost a first and a second round. And then basically, corner, they said, well, what can you confirm? He's like, from the horse's mouth, the Steelers contacted the Jaguars about Trevor Lawrence. Maybe they did. The Steelers have an unanswered question mark at quarterback.
Yeah, I think that there could be a twofold benefit in contacting all these teams about their possible free agent quarterbacks or the quarterbacks that they're looking to have dealt, in that you make Fields' agent feel a little bit uncertain. Maybe they talk down from the number that they're starting out with. If Fields' agent thinks the Steelers might be interested in other players, and he doesn't have the best tape to market himself as a dynasty level quarterback, even though that's what we think we have. Maybe his price comes down a little bit. So it's always great to reach out and see what the market is for guys like Trevor Lawrence, guys like it's crazy that Matt Stafford is in that conversation, but Daniel Jones is definitely in the same conversation, I think, as Trevor Lawrence, despite what people's perceptions of each of them are.
Yeah.
Evaluate the overall stats of the last 4 years. Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence both only have one statistical above average year. Everything else is average to below average. So,
and they've been given good wideouts, round one talent.
Yeah.
Both to run and to catch.
I like Daniel Jones and the conversation of bringing him in to compete against somebody. I think I read something today where Fields wants to be the starter, and that's kind of like part of his contract where he wants guaranteed. He doesn't want to go into the 2025 season like he did the 2024 season and it just be a repeat. That could potentially really down his stock if he has just a really bad game or two where he's only given a small sample size that he can then market to other teams in 2026. So I see where Fields' agent might want him to get a kind of a guaranteed starting position. And so starting money in the league as well. So I think that's where he has the leverage over the Steelers, and the Steelers have to regain leverage by turning over every stone in the league. There's a lot of quarterbacks out there that aren't Justin Herberts. They're not Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen's. Majority of the league is. So those guys are expendable. The Steelers are doing their due diligence. That's what we want to see from the Pittsburgh front office. We want them contacting every team. What's it going to cost?
I think that this might also point to us targeting or lining up a longer term deal for Fields. I think 1 to 2 years has been what's kind of proliferated out on social media and from some people, but I think we've seen a lot of great things out of Justin Fields. It would really behoove them to ink a 3-year this year, potentially maybe even a 4-year, although if he turns out to not be the guy that we think he can be, you start getting into 4 or 5 years, those deals start to look a lot more ugly. So I think 3 is really kind of the Goldilocks deal here for Justin Fields and the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaning towards 3.
What base salary, what do you think he's going to command this year?
So at the ceiling, I think Jalen Hurts, he's definitely slower than Justin Fields, but he's a little bit more mature. I mean, he's obviously won bigger games. Hurts only got, I think, like $15 million this past year. And that's initially kind of where I was thinking Fields to be. But just given that, I think maybe somewhere around 13, it would be great for both teams. I wouldn't mind paying him 15. I think we can do it, but that's kind of where my head's at. We were talking about these Super Bowl champion teams. Most of them were either they were a Manning or Mahomes or a Brady since we last went to the Super Bowl. One of the teams was on, Mahomes was on his rookie deal one of the years. Russell Wilson was on his rookie deal one of the years, but the other guys that won that weren't Manning or Brady or Mahomes after his rookie deal were, Nick Foles, a late Joe Flacco. Like, you don't have to have a rookie deal QB or a Manning or a Brady. You can win with sort of a non-prototypical roster setup. Eventually, I think maybe if we go 2-year 15, Fields is going to, and he proves himself, he'll get up into the $20 million range, 25 even. But we could go 15 3-year right now. And I think that he still has more to play for.
That's kind of where I'm at. 15 million annually. If we have to push that up a little bit, I'm fine with that. I want familiarity. I want to see how he can grow.
We want him to be excited about coming into the building.
Yeah. So at 15, 18 million, that's not going to break the bank if you choose to go elsewhere. If you choose to draft a rookie in next year's draft class that maybe beats him out. That's not going to break the bank. You're still not investing a ton of money. Omar Khan, the con artist, I know he will make this contract as financially tight as possible. So I trust him to get the job done.
You mentioned salary cap going up, I think, did you say $30 million this upcoming season?
Last year it went up 30. This upcoming season it went up like 19 or 20.
So over the last 2 seasons, it's went up $50 million. So it's sitting around 230.
Yeah, 275.
275. So if it's went up 50 million in 2 years
Mm-hmm.
and it's 275, we're a little under like 22, 23% of a cap increase. Taking that into consideration, I think last year, if Fields had the kind of year that he had in Pittsburgh this year, the previous year, coming into Pittsburgh, he would get that kind of money. I'm a little bit more bullish on Fields given the cap increase and his performance in a small sample size. I think a team is going to pay him. I think he's going to need $20 million a season to get on a roster based off of just the cap increase and his small sample size and his style of play. I think his style of play, he's going to play hard. He's going to run the ball. He's going to be asked to run the ball a lot. So he's more injury prone, and that's going to shorten his career, maybe. But his agent has to think that in the back of his mind. He's more vulnerable to that big hit and that injury than somebody that's sitting in a pocket. And if he's coming to Pittsburgh with 2 revolving doors at tackle, as an agent, I want that guaranteed money.
Agreed. Plus, we don't want him to hit the open market. So whatever deal needs done, it needs to be an extension on to the last little bit of his current contract, so where we're able to sign him before he can hit the open market. Hitting the open market scares me because teams overpay. Who's to say he's not pulled out to Vegas or up north to the Giants? I mean, these teams are desperate.
Vegas has a good offense. That's a good situation he can go into.
Mm-hmm. Derek Carr unlikely to return to the Saints, reported today. New Orleans under new coach Kellen Moore. Similar play style to Jalen Hurts, who he just won a Super Bowl with. I really don't want to see Justin Fields hit the open market. I agree. I could overpay a little bit. I could live with it. Maybe he outplays his contract tenfold, but okay.
You guys all make great points around that. I think the one thing that for some reason is true is like Justin Fields is just sort of looked at. He's almost got this like Trey Lance treatment around him, and it doesn't really make sense. But I mean, we got him a 6th round pick from Chicago. All of the teams that we're talking about needed a quarterback last year. None of them picked up the phone and were interested.
True.
He did come out and win 4 games for us with a bad offense. I just don't know how that's living in teams' heads. I thought he looked great. There were a couple of throws he made that I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is a franchise for sure. This is going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Agreed. All great points and all exciting things to look forward to in the next couple of weeks and into March when we get into free agency. I think the next thing we wanted to segue into was the current state of Steelers journalism and the expansion of social media. I know we use a lot of resources on Twitter, waiting for the reports or the analysis out of the people that are paid to travel and cover the Steelers directly from the team. I'm not saying they do a bad job, but there's quicker access. Steelers Depot does a great job of providing grades, positional grades right after the game. I know there's a lot of tools.
Yeah, we're millennials. We grew up when social media started becoming a thing. And in college, we would wait every week for the Ed Bouchette transcript to come out where he would allow fans to ask questions and he would give answers. And he had the insights, he had the knowledge, he knew Kevin Colbert better than anybody else. And that was kind of the highlights of our week, catching up on these transcripts. And you have Mark Cabali and you have Andrew Filipponi that would also do similar things. They're what I would consider more of the last generation of journalists of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We call them beat writers, whatever you want to call them. They have their podcasts. Some of them now, have Andrew Filipponi's pretty active on X, and Mark Caboli is in with the Pat McAfee show. He's kind of reporting on the Steelers there. But the new age of journalists have taken Twitter, what now is X, and really used it to their advantage because people want to know Steelers information right now. They want to know it while it's fresh in their mind. They want to read Twitter while they're watching a game. I could get on Twitter or X and know exactly what's going on in the Steelers game without ever even turning on the TV, because you have guys like Alex Kozora and Derek Bell given the play-by-play and given their objective analyses play-by-play. And it goes in the offseason as well. You have Alex Kozora that reports every offseason practice. He does all of the mock drafts. He does player prospect analyses. So that's one name that I bring up a lot is Alex Kozora, because he's been doing it for a while and he works for Steelers Depot, and I'm sure Sean could talk days about him.
Oh yeah, shout out to Alex Kozora. Big fan. Guy that lives at Steelers training camp. Once that rolls around, he's there day in, day out, taking notes. Alex, if you ever see this podcast, big fans here at the show. Appreciate all your hard work. And it really streamlines into our analysis. We use a lot of your tools. So to our followers, if you're less familiar with the online game, Steelers Depot, great articles. Alex Kozora, definitely one of the leaders there with Dave Bryant. Yeah, incredible analysis, analytics, breakdown, especially come draft time and then into training camp. Incredible work over there.
His mock drafts, he hits prospects like right on the nail. He'll predict probably 50% of who the Steelers draft year in and year out. It's wild when there's 250 prospects entering a draft portal. And then a name that I mentioned just a bit ago, Derek Bell, he works for Steelers now, and I don't think he's been doing it as long as Alex Kozora, but he does similar prospect analysis. He uses the metrics. He has the all 22, and he breaks down footage and schemes. Very smart when it comes to football plays and how they're supposed to be executed.
Yeah, exactly. I think you touched on that perfectly. As this show, Not Yinz Father's podcast, progresses, I know we are in the process of heating up our mock drafts. It's exciting. It's a fun thing to do. Pre-free agency, pre-combine, it's a little harder to predict, but we've gotten great insight from some of these guys and how they do it, learning more about the Steelers' pre-draft visits, getting 30 official visits, not including local visits, analysis from these websites and from these guys about who the Steelers meet with at the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, all these different, I mean, now there's 3 or 4 different bowl games, and they're covering all 4. A lot of information, because when it all comes down to it, the Steelers have a very set way of doing things. So hopefully this information kind of helps us transition, and if we could hit on 50% in our mock drafts, I'd be thrilled, which we have done in the past.
Yeah, the Steelers are really good at tipping their hats on who they like. Alex and the Steelers Depot have made these boards where it's like every defensive tackle that they've drafted in the last 10 years has had at least a hand size this big, has at least had a height of this, has ran a 40 of this, has bench pressed this, and they limit it down to like 2 or 3 prospects in the entire draft. Or one of them will be in their 30-man visits, so you know if he falls to the Steelers in any given round that might be a selection for him. So
yeah, they've pointed out a lot of guys that have fit that mold, from Javon Hargrave a few years ago, finding these guys and then making that analysis a reality. There have been countless examples. Yeah, again, great insight, information. For us, it's a little more factual as opposed to the hot takes of Pony. I know Pickett to Pickens. How many times did he tweet that?
he tweeted like 6 times that it was going to be the next Montana to Rice.
Yeah, wow. A little wrong there.
Pickett, he had a great preseason in 2023. So Filipponi was getting really excited. He was a very happy man because he predicted that Pickett would take us to the promised land. And
yeah,
Alex and Derek are very optimistic writers. You know, they're very optimistic, but they're very objective. They use a lot of stats and metrics. They focus more on the individual rather than the whole team, because you can get pessimistic when you're watching the Steelers year in and year out fail in the first round or barely miss the playoffs. So you'll see guys like Andrew predict the Steelers are going to go 7-10 every year. And
yeah, it's always good to find that objective hope that is backed by analysis and not just the casual Yinzer going, I don't know, gut feeling 14 wins. I want to remain optimistic. I want to be as informed as possible without it can be depressing, 5-6 games skid down to end the season. That's depressing.
Yeah.
To go from the top of the mountain to an avalanche fall. And for the players, the fans, the coaching staff, I mean, we quickly transitioned to a little bit of off-season hope. We try to join in with the Derricks and the Alex Kazoras, and let's find some optimism. Let's find some ways to make some changes.
Yeah, what's more fun than a mock draft?
I agree. So I have one, and it's a rough draft. Again, pre-combine, free agency. Without further ado, I mean, round one, I have a draft crush, like a giddy schoolgirl, and that would be Emeka Ibuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. He is my number one draft crush this year. I think he is the next great Ohio State wide receiver. I think that they all do things very well. They're very well coached by Brian Hartline. They transition easily and quickly to the NFL. And Ibuka coming in doesn't need to be the superstar. We need that Robin for George Pickens. We don't necessarily need the Batman Robin. We need performance, and we need catches, we need yards, and we need touchdowns. We need reliable options that get open. And who gets open better than Emeka Ibuka?
I like the pick.
Jake, who are you targeting round one?
I'd be really happy with Ibuka. He's probably in my top 5 prospects that I imagine will be there when the Steelers pick. But Derek Harmon's my round one guy from Oregon, the defensive tackle.
You can't go wrong with Harmon. Just a huge man, stands out on tape, 310, 6'5", 310. Officially a junior out of Oregon, gets upfield and wreaks havoc.
The Steelers like drafting juniors in the first round, guys that come out early for the draft. That's who they go for in the first round. Typically, he would be a good fit for Pittsburgh. He had a really high win rate percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he would be a really good fit there in the first round. And then you cross off that need off your list for a defensive end, defensive tackle. He could play both.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that the Steelers love versatility. A guy that could slide all on the defensive line and interject some youth there. Again, I'd be thrilled with that pick. Corey, who you leaning towards round one? I know you like Benjamin Morrison. I know you've been talking about him too out of Notre Dame.
There's not a lot of depth at the corner position, and it's just a position that we really need to invest in. Burks out of Ohio State. Yeah, Ben Morrison out of Notre Dame, 6 foot, 186. I would really be happy with Egbuka. I think that is who we should go with. We need that top tier talent in round one. We need our playmakers, the guys responsible for getting the ball down the field into the end zone. We need to put money and draft capital into those guys. The free agency markets are terrible. So
agreed.
Good prospects at running back later in the rounds. I'm happy with that Egbuka.
Speaking of running backs, as we move to round two, in my mock draft, I have the Steelers selecting Caleb Johnson, the talented running back from Iowa. ESPN ranks him as a third-ranked running back on their best available list, 6 foot, 225, number 50 overall. The Steelers get him at 52. Explosive, does a little bit of everything well, yards after contact. Not asked to catch the ball a lot, but I think that's a guy that could fit well into Arthur Smith's wide zone scheme. And not asked to be the bell cow, as we're expecting Jaylen Warren to come back, but gives us depth. Jaylen Warren missed some time this year, at the beginning of the year, so you never know when you're going to need somebody to step up. For me, that guy is Caleb Johnson.
I love the fit. Look at every Steelers roster since 2004, and they've always had a big back. They've never went into a season with like 2 average size backs or a small back. They always have a big back, and he fits the Arthur Smith wide zone scheme because that's what he runs at Iowa. So I really like the pick. If I were to go Derek Harmon in the first round, I would probably go Trey Harris in the second round.
Good pick.
Like his win percentage against man coverage and what he averaged against man coverage. I think you put him in the slot or you put him outside. He's versatile. I think he would work really well with Pickens in any offense. I think he's an immediate upgrade over Van Jefferson, and he's your wide receiver too.
I like the pick. 6'2", 205, uses that body incredibly well. ESPN has him as a 6th ranked receiver. Should fit right into that round 2 category after the guys like McMillan, Barden, Ibuka, and Golden. So Harris, I love the pick. He is, as much as I love Ibuka, I've been growing on Golden, and right there is Trey Harris. So to get him in the second round, great value there. I love the pick. Corey.
Round 2.
Round 2.
We saw the Eagles Super Bowl winning roster earlier, touched on them, very young on defense, a lot of rookie players. I like Darius Alexander on the defensive front. He's up there, I think, projected first or second. Talik Williams out of Ohio State. I mean, I'm looking at ESPN right now. They've got him third. In our mocks, he seems to be falling around 2 or 3. Pre-combine, it's hard to say. I think we probably want to go defensive front or corner in round 2. If not running back, I can understand running back. I like probably Talik Williams if he's there. Maybe Darius Alexander if he's not.
I like the pick, Corey. Tyleek Williams, 6'3", 327 out of Ohio State. A huge body that the Steelers desperately need. Big, active hands, run stuffer. Something the Steelers, desperately need more help and more youth up front. So I'm a big fan of that pick.
Yeah, definitely if you're going wide receiver in the first round.
So into round 3 we go. I have to drop down a little bit farther after your guys like Harmon and Williams get drafted. I'm looking at TJ Sanders from South Carolina. A little smaller than your prospect, 6'4", 290, but generally fits that mold that the Steelers need on the defensive end. Cam Hayward is getting older. Larry Ogunjobi, will he be back? We don't know. And the depth behind there has been lackluster and underperforming. TJ Sanders is a guy that I think can immediately compete and climb that depth chart to be the main backup and then see snaps even his rookie year. So that's my 3rd round pick.
I like him as a prospect. He's a very explosive player. He has that explosive first step. Really like the pick. I think if we get him in the 3rd, that would be a steal. I'm going kind of unconventional here and going Cam Scatterbro with my 3rd round pick. I think he falls to the 3rd. I think he's your mean running back that pairs so well with Warren, your 1-2 punch. You get your defensive tackle in the 1st round. You go wide receiver in the 2nd round with Trey Harris, and then you get Cam Scatterbro in the 3rd round. And you have a good core set of players.
What can you say? Cam Scatterboo, maybe one of the most prolific players in the college football playoff this year, 5'10", 225 pounds, human bowling ball looking figure with incredible catches throughout this year to top off the powerful running. Steelers find great value there for you, Jake. I think round 3 is about where I have him, just because running backs are a little undervalued, but definitely a top 60 prospect in my opinion, but probably gets drafted a little later than that because of the deappreciation of the running back position. Corey, round 3, pick 83. You are Omar Khan.
So at 83, I lobbied, I guess, for wide receiver in the 1st round and then defensive tackle in the 2nd. With that in mind, I'm thinking about coming back to the offensive side of the ball into the trenches at tackle, looking at Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. We've got a great former Mountaineer and Zach Frazier. It's kind of the one thing that they do well in West Virginia is their front on the offensive side of the ball. Milam would pair well with Frazier and it would give us that youthful need up front. If we didn't go Egbuka in the 1st, I think Jalen Royals might be there in the 3rd. It's kind of hard to say. I like him in the 3rd as well, but I think I'm going to lock in Wyatt Milam. That's what I'm going to roll with.
I don't think that's a reach at all. This was a guy at the end of the year had a lot of 1st round grades. The problem is, as teams got into his tape, they're determining that he's more destined to slide inside, which always hurts a guy's draft stock a little bit. So ESPN still ranks him as the 12th ranked offensive tackle. But if you slide him inside, similar to the guy from North Dakota State, Glaze, I think these are both round 3 targets. I give the nod, Corey, you're right, to Wyatt Milam. And imagine the interior offensive line of Frazier, Milam, and McCormick the next 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
That would be some nasty power football there. All right, round 4, I finally attack the secondary. I get my guy, Malachi Moore, the do-it-all defensive back from Alabama, stuck around after Nick Saban's retirement. He had the chance to declare and go pro last year. How many picks do we say he had this year?
I think it was 7.
Wow.
Yeah, 7. Incredible production.
Crazy.
Kind of reminds me of a Tyrann Mathieu type. Slides all around the defense. Where do the Steelers desperately need help? In that slot corner, nickel roll. I mean, the Cam Sutton experiment didn't go as planned. Beanie Bishop, some great games, some questionable games. I could see us attacking outside corner and possibly slot corner, but we also need to inject some more youth into that DB room. And Moore is that Swiss Army knife that the Steelers desperately need, that they haven't had since Mike Hilton, Jake's favorite.
Yeah, I love Mike Hilton. Yeah, and I love the pick too, Sean. I'm so bullish on Malachi Moore that I don't predict him to be there still in the 4th round. I think he'll be gone a round earlier, or else that would have been my pick. But if he's there, I'm jumping on that. Like, I really am. And this could be the year they trade back and acquire some of those middle round prospects where they can acquire him, potentially move up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going with Upton Stout from Western Kentucky. I think
Good pick.
he will slide inside and play slot cornerback for us. And he reminds me so much of Mike Hilton and his tenacity around the ball. He's very twitchy. He's not like our outside corners. He's a different type of corner. And I think he fits what we really need right there in our nickel defense.
I agree. I like the tape. I like what I've seen. Again, a little undersized, 5'9", 182. Probably does project a slide inside where he will be a force. I love the pick. When I had DB circled here, he was one of the few guys that was on my short list. I like me some Upton Stout.
Cool.
Corey, round 4, pick 122. You were on the clock.
It's tough. I'm just trying to think about who I think might realistically be there at this pick.
Have you went running back yet?
I haven't gone running back yet.
Dylan Sampson might.
Yeah, Dylan Sampson. Good size, 5'11", 201. He's a guy I've had in the round 4 category if I didn't get a running back in round 2 like I did.
Thank you guys for pointing that out. I'll go ahead and lock in Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. We definitely need a ball carrier. I'll roll with him.
Great pick. I didn't even think of Dylan Sampson before I made my pick.
All right, moving on to round 5. So I went back and forth on a couple of Notre Dame guys. Both had really good years on that defensive line, and that's Howard Cross III and Riley Mills. I'm going to double dip here at defensive end and inject some youth, and maybe I will feel better if in the process we targeted a true defensive tackle in free agency. But I still want to inject some youth and some performance into that defensive line. Howard Cross, 6'1", 288, but an elite pass rusher, but also a good run stuffer. He does everything well. That Notre Dame defense was so stout. That defensive line makes me very, very happy. Kind of went back and forth. 2 guys I have seen as far as round 5, round 6. So I'm going to take Howard Cross, the third. Jake?
There's 2 guys that I really like here in the 5th round, and I'm not quite sure if either of them will be there. One is CJ West. If we can get Derek Harmon and CJ West in the same draft, that would set our defensive line up with Benton to be the future. But if CJ West isn't there, I really like the tight end out of Miami. I think you can replace Connor Hayward with that Herrero. He'll attack the seam. He's a giant guy. He could run routes. I don't know exactly what his comp would be because he's very athletic. I'm trying to look at his size.
6'4", 245, Elijah Herrero, tight end from Miami. When I watch him on tape, I don't know how you feel, Jake, but it kind of gives me Aaron Hernandez vibes. Not to bring that name up, but similar to that jackknife tight end that can get in there in line, more or less used to create space for the passing game. I like him a lot on tape. I want to see him in some of these agility drills to see how ahead of the pack and how he compares to the tight end Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, who are 2 most athletic tight ends in this class by far. But I like the pick.
He might be gone before there. You know, I'm being hopeful that either CJ West or Elijah Herrero is there, but I think Herrero will be there in the 5th round. That's who I would take.
Yeah, ecstatic with either of those picks. All right, Corey, you ready for the last pick before we get into the 7th round?
I'm gonna bounce back to the defensive side of the ball here. I know we went DT. I'm probably gonna pop into linebacker just to try and reload there, get a guy. I think Jack Kaiser might be here around this position.
I agree.
I've seen some great tape on him. One play in particular, he was getting cut and he just threw the, I think it was a running back down to the ground and stayed on his feet, used his hands to kind of push him off the ground and get to the sack. Notre Dame sends players to Pittsburgh, so they make great Steelers, and I'm going to lock in Jack Kaiser here in the 5th.
I love the pick. Jack Kaiser, talented middle linebacker from Notre Dame, 6'2", 231, Captain Jack. Force to be reckoned with, potentially pairing him up with Peyton Wilson for years to come. Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I love the pick.
All right. So Steelers have 3 picks in round 7. Those are 225, 238, and 247. To save some time, I'm just going to give all 3 of mine. And my 3 guys on this list are Caleb Ransaw, quarterback from Tulane, a standout at the Senior Bowl. Made some plays. There's not a lot of tape on him as we've been trying to watch, but when we do watch, he stands out. Big play in the Senior Bowl, a guy I am throwing the dart on in round 7. After that, I have Ja'Cory Brooks, the talented wide receiver from Louisville, kind of going under the radar in this draft process. I mean, it's still early. We haven't seen the combine yet. Ja'Cory Brooks, the transfer from Alabama a few seasons ago, put together a heck of a year. 61 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Was a focal point in this Louisville offense. You know, not ranked initially in the ESPN top 200. I'm snagging him here at 238. And lastly, I am drafting Donovan Edwards, talented running back from Michigan. He has been improving his draft stock, kind of the forgotten guy. He's always been in a running back by committee, a run-heavy offense at Michigan, but a guy that stood out to me at the Senior Bowl, running routes, a little more agile, better hands than I thought. So for me, I'm double dipping. With just Jaylen Warren coming back, I want to add to this running back room, and I'm throwing a dart and trying to grab Donovan Edwards. Another guy I thought about was Marcus Yarns from Delaware. 5'11", 190, but projected to run blazing speed. And if he does, he could climb some draft boards. So I went with Donovan Edwards.
I think they'll double dip at running back potentially. So yours was Ransaw,
Ja'Cory Brooks, and Donovan Edwards.
I'm not super familiar with Ja'Cory Brooks, but I know the other players. And solid 7th round. I'd be happy with. I'm going to go with Demetrius Knight. I think he might be there because the middle linebackers fall. I really like Demetrius Knight from South Carolina. I like Caleb Ransaw. Caleb Ransaw would be my 7th round pick. He balled out in the bowl game. Had an interception, came up and had a really good tackle on Donaldson, the running back from WVU. So I think if he's there in the 7th round, you have to take him. He'll slide inside. He played up near the line of scrimmage most games, I think, based the teams that they played against, the types of offenses. But he can slide right in there and play that nickel corner or nickel safety. And then lastly, LeJohntay Wester from Colorado. I thought he had some great one-on-ones in the practices leading up to the Senior Bowl. I think if he's there in the 7th round, you could double dip at receiver. So my draft, you'd have Trey Harris and LeJohntay Wester, who can also play inside.
I am liking the picks. Demetrius Knight, 6'2", 245, a guy that has stood out to me. And 82 tackles last year, just a force for that South Carolina defense. But the Wester pick, I mean, Shadur had plenty of receiving options, and Wester to me stood out arguably the most. You could say Jimmy Horn Jr., I mean, other than Travis Hunter, obviously, but when you get into these 2nd and 3rd, 4th receivers, Wester was the guy that if I were picking any of them to become a Steeler, Wester's that guy. I'm with you, Jake. I love that pick. Corey.
Here in the 7th, being that we have 3 picks kind of back to back to back, definitely looking to double dip at the skilled position. A guy like Ja'Cory Merritt, we talked about him in some of our mock drafts. Guy out of Arizona, kind of bounced around Arizona to Ole Miss, back to Arizona. Shrine Bowl MVP, no combine invite. We'll see if he jots up people's list towards the draft, if he has a good pro day. He had 1,000 rushing yards in 2023, not injured at all, and sat out most of the year, so he's not going to be banged up. Fast guy. So I'll take him at running back to double dip there with Dylan Sampson. For wide receiver, going to double dip as well. We'll go ahead and draft Colin Lacey out of Louisville, possible undrafted free agent. Talked about him in our episode 1 draft crushes. A wide receiver out of Louisville. Was injured last year, but ran with Ja'Cory, Sean's pick. And then just for the hell of it, I think I'll go ahead and triple dip on the running back position just to have a full stable of backs, since we're not bringing Cordero or Najee back, and the free agent market is so weak. I'll go ahead and take Jaden Blue, who you heard it here first. This guy is going to absolutely rocket up draft boards post combine. Just a part of that committee downfall. So the rare triple running back draft.
When you have 8 picks, round 7 is about adding to that room and taking chances on guys. Like, you're not necessarily going to hit home runs, but you got to at least swing. So, Corey, I don't know where your head's at, honestly. These 2 running backs, Ja'Cory Merritt out of Arizona, bounced around in the transfer portal a good bit his career, but put up numbers wherever he was. Yeah, played in 1 game, 13 carries, 113 yards and a touchdown in the limited action he got to play for Arizona in 1 game, and then ruled ineligible because of a transfer issue. An interesting name, coming off a 1,000-yard season before that. Then he goes to the Shrine Bowl and tears it up, 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards. Kind of snubbed. I was excited to see him at the Combine, snubbed with a Combine invite. I will be excited to see him at his senior day. I want to see what he can run. I want to see him go through drills. So that Arizona senior day will be something I'm going to turn into. I also really like your Jalen Blue pick out of Texas. Similar to my Donovan Edwards pick, a running back by committee used at Texas. But Blue, like the Swiss Army knife, the guy, a lot of passes thrown his way. Mostly swing passes, but Texas, Steve Sarkisian wants to get that guy the ball in space. What can you say? I'm a big fan. And then Colin Lacey, injured for most of this year, but 2023, 91 catches, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Would have been really interesting to see what he can do in that prolific Louisville offense. Partnered with Ja'Cory Brooks for the whole year. That could have been a team to be reckoned with multiple 1,000-yard receivers. Lacey, 5'10", 190. I like the pick, Corey. And that wraps our mock draft and wraps up episode 3 of Not Yinz Father's podcast. Any closing remarks, Jake?
Great talk. Thought we brought up some great points early on, and the draft is always fun.
Yes, it is. Go Steelers. Corey, any final insight?
Like, subscribe. We appreciate you guys listening. Leave your thoughts in the comments and share with another Yinzer.
Till next time, guys. This is Not Yinz Father's podcast.